There is a serious question before the House. Our public schools are in a state of crisis. Quality education is the foundation of opportunity and a fairer future, and it must be accessible for all. For too long, our public schools have suffered from chronic underfunding, with parents and carers stepping in to raise much-needed funds through sausage sizzles and school fetes. In Warringah, our 21 public schools are significantly affected, and underfunding remains a pressing concern for families. In fact, I recently wrote to the Education Minister to express support for the findings of the experts panel's Improving Outcomes for All report, which highlights the stark funding inequalities in our education system. And the findings are deeply concerning. High school completion rates in public schools have fallen from 83% to 76% in just 6 years, and over 1/3 of students are failing to meet literacy and numeracy standards on NAPLAN. And while the government's funding and reform bill here today goes some way to restoring funding of our public schools, there's still a long way to go. Now, like many parents in Warringah, I have actually had the opportunity to participate and, with my children, engage in pretty much all levels of all types of school. Ironically, my children have attended public primary schools. I've had a child attend a selective public high school. I have had children attend a faith-based school and a private schools. So I've had touch points with all systems, and I have to say some of those decisions and choices were driven by a desire to give my children the best opportunity possible. But I did notice you can't be blind to the difference in resources and the quality of the facilities available to the students. It is vastly different, and that is intrinsically unfair. And the government plays a part in its funding model to ensure that we do that it's equitable, that there is access to those opportunities for all, and the schooling and educational outcomes are a lot fairer. Now, the bill's intention and the government here is ongoing work to strengthen funding arrangements for public schools and to have more transparency. The bill introduces a strong accountability and transparency measures requiring an annual update to Parliament on the progress of the national school reform. And from my point of view, it is so important that we have integrity and more accountability and transparency from the government on how the funding is working. So it's great to see that in this bill. But this bill is just a start. It can go a lot further. So we know back in 2011, David Gonski led the review of funding for schooling and determined schooling resources standard, the SRS, and it's an estimate between how much total public funding a school needs to meet its students' educational needs. But unfortunately, it's fallen behind, and there is a gap that has I think, had a real impact on the outcomes for students, and it's something the government must address. And unfortunately, despite the good intention, I think, of this bill, there remains a gap, and that those that will pay the price for that gap will be the students. And if the students pay a price for that gap, it is us as Australia. Australia as a country will pay the price, because that's our future. The responsibility, as I said, is shared. The Commonwealth is responsible for the majority of public school funding for public funding for non-government schools, providing 80% of the SRS, and the states contribute 20% of that funding for non-government schools. And as other members in this place have noted, non-government schools are often seeing a much higher level of facilities, of spending, and I've been able to observe that firsthand as a parent that's participated in that process. And we have to make sure that the public schools are receiving their fair share of funding. The states, as the owners and administrators of public schools, are the majority funders currently of public schools, so responsible for 75% of the SRS, and the Commonwealth is currently responsible for 20% of the SRS. So we've had this remaining 5% gap, which has meant that public schools have fallen behind in terms of the quality of their resources and having sufficient funding to really meet the needs of students. And that 5% gap is the ultimate problem, and unfortunately it remains, despite the intentions of the Minister, and certainly there remains remains a 2.5% gap in relation to the New South Wales schools. And so clearly more is done. The Better and Fairer Schools Agreement, this joint agreement now that's intended to commence on 1st of January 2025, it replaces the current NSRA that is due to expire. Unfortunately, there's a gap for New South Wales schools, and that is unacceptable. And the reality is it will fall on the Commonwealth Government to meet that gap. The system needs greater funding certainty to ensure that the children are the ones, in fact, getting the best education. So whilst there's an intention in this bill to strengthen funding to public school, it doesn't guarantee it, and that is problematic. Chronic underfunding negatively affects students' educational outcomes, mental wellbeing, and teachers' ability to perform and stay in the profession. So I urge the government to increase the minimum funding floor to 25% to offer a genuine pathway for schools to reach that 100% of schooling resources standard funding. And I look at examples within my community. For example, Balgala Boys Campus, or Bally Boys as we know it, consistently ranked among the top non-selective schools in New South Wales. Incredible results academically. Despite this, and I've visited the school grounds on a number of occasions, the school grounds, they're a huge community concern. Outdated facilities, asbestos in buildings, limited access to toilets, sports halls, music rooms. Many really felt like relics of another era. And I say this with respect because the boys and the teachers at that school are amazing. They are achieving so much. And I've raised these issues with Premier Minns and the New South Wales Education Minister. I've invited them to come and visit the school. Come and see for yourself the conditions in which these boys are performing fantastically. And tell me that that standard of facility is respectful for them and their future and the efforts they are putting. But the invitation to visit remains unanswered, I should say. They have not taken up the call to come and see firsthand to see that. And these exceptional students are overachieving despite substandard conditions, and they deserve better. So increasing funding and providing a clear path to full funding would ensure students from schools like Bally Boys have access to every opportunity during their school years. I should say in New South Wales there are other concerns around schooling. Currently, the New South Wales Department of Education is consulting the community on proposed changes to Northern Beaches high schools. The proposals include significant changes, including changing class year groups accepted at Freshwater Senior Campus, potentially merging Mackellar Girls and Balgala Boys into co-educational schools against the wishes of all the school communities. And while feedback is under review, it's essential that high-performing schools, but under-resourced, have the support necessary to meet the evolving needs of the community and the young people learning there. Also, what we've seen is the New South Wales Department of Education announced changes to the opportunity classes at the local Balgala Heights Public School, and that serves academically gifted students in Year 5 and 6. And that's been done again without very little consultation, with great impact to the local student cohort. It will have impacts on staffing, on the quality of outcomes. And again, I've written to the Minister, but there doesn't seem to be a willingness to engage with the consequences of the proposed changes. Now, while I'm here talking about local schools and public education, I have to say a huge thank you to my cohort of youth ambassadors who every year for the last 4 years I have been able to bring together the school leaders of all the high schools in the electorate of Warringah. And we meet about every 6 weeks, and it is a fantastic opportunity to hear from these young leaders, their voices, the issues that they are concerned with, and giving them that opportunity to talk to their representative and to make sure they know what's happening in Canberra, here in Parliament, on their behalf. I should also do a shout out to all the beautiful Year 5 and Year 6 students who come and visit Parliament House. They are always so engaged and just so interested in this process. It is always so motivating to know that being in this place is on behalf of them and their future. So I look forward to the Minister engaging with the amendments that are before it in relation to this bill, fully funding our public schools as an investment in our children's future and our country, A strong education system is critical for spurring the innovation needed to tackle the climate crisis and ensuring our youth thrive in a complex and rapidly evolving economy. Quality education is essential to equip children with the skills to navigate the complexities of a digital world and empower them with the knowledge to discern fact from misinformation. So I urge the government to adopt the vital amendments and make sure there is fully funding and future-proof the funding of our schools today.